We're looking at a number of different Psalms over the course of these weeks this summer. And the Psalms, as we've been saying, is the songbook of the Bible. Psalm simply means song. Right in the middle of the Bible, God put a songbook. And these songs are emotional. They're very real. They're raw. Probably every and any emotion that you could ever experience in life is somehow expressed in the Psalms, in the book of Psalms. And really, the Psalms teach us and lead us and guide us, kind of mentor us into how to have a real living relationship with the real living God of the universe. You read the Psalms, you learn how to relate to God, how to live with God, even in the midst of all the ups and downs of life. And this morning, we want to look at a topic, a theme that is a huge one in the whole Bible, especially in the book of Psalms. It's something that all of us go through in life, no matter who you are. But it's something that we don't talk about very often. We don't even think about it very often. And what I'm talking about is this whole theme, this whole topic of waiting. Waiting. Okay? We all have to wait in life, don't we? It can be something small, waiting in line, waiting in a traffic jam. It might be something big. We're waiting for our marriage to happen, waiting to find someone, waiting to have a baby, waiting for a job, waiting for an opportunity to come up, waiting for some clarity for a decision that we need to make, waiting for some news that we're expecting, waiting for some situation to get over, some problem to end, maybe some person to change. We're all waiting, aren't we? I don't think there's anyone here who's not waiting for something, right? And I know that because as I was thinking about waiting this week, as I was getting ready to preach and just thinking about the times that I've waited in my life, things that I'm waiting for right now, I realized, I'm 41, almost 41 and a half years old now, and I've basically been waiting for 41 and a half years. For something or other, right? I can't think of a single time in my life that I wasn't waiting for something to happen, right? When you're a kid, you wait for, to get into the older grades. You wait to grow up. You wait for college. Then you wait to find out which college you're going to get into. Then you wait for a job. Then you wait for a better job. You wait to get married. You wait to have a child. When you get pregnant, you're waiting for 9 months, especially that first child. Right? It feels like an eternity for that child to finally come. Right? Then when you have the child, you wait for them to walk. You wait for them, first of all, to crawl or to turn over. Then you wait for them to talk. You wait for them to develop a personality. Right? We're always waiting for something. Right? That's part of life. And waiting is not just part of life, but it's often very difficult, right? Starting from just the small little things, waiting at a red light, waiting in traffic, waiting for this person to show up for the meeting and they're half an hour late, all the way down to waiting for this big thing that you've been praying for and hoping for and waiting for. And waiting is not just sitting around. Waiting is in very often incredibly difficult, isn't it? Very often waiting is not some immediate thing or some very painful thing necessarily that's just happening, like some physical pain or something that's hurting us, but it's this kind of slow pain, isn't it? It's this kind of stretching that goes on and on and on, and we're waiting and waiting and waiting for this thing to happen or this thing to change or this thing to end. And sometimes we even feel like we just want something to happen. Good or bad, doesn't matter, but something. Right? This waiting is so painful. It's excruciating so often. And thankfully, just like every other topic, situation that we might face, problem, issue that we might face in life, it's talked about in the Bible. Like I said, waiting, this whole idea, issue of waiting is a huge one in the Bible. In fact, if you just think about the people in the Bible, people that we consider heroes, champions, men and women of faith, how long they had to wait. Right? Think about Abraham, if you know that story. God promised Abraham, I'm going to make your descendants into a great nation, as numerous as the sand on the seashore, the stars in the sky. And Abraham says, what? Excuse me, God, I don't even have a single child. Forget about sand on the seashore, stars in the sky. I just want one. If I just had one boy, girl, I would be happy. And how long does Abraham have to wait for God to fulfill that promise of a son? 25 years. And the promise comes when he's 75. Can you imagine? 25 years until he's age 100, finally. God makes it happen. Right? 25 years. Think about David. If you know the story of David, he was anointed as king when he was just a child. Shepherd boy out in the fields with the flock. And they say that maybe he was around 15 years old or even less. He's anointed as king. He's told he's going to be king. And when does he actually become king over all of Israel? Do you know? 37 years old. At least 22, maybe 25 years he waited. He's already been anointed. 25 years he waits to become the king, and actually most of that waiting, or a big chunk of that waiting, he's in the caves. He's running for his life. He's being hunted down like an animal. Waiting. When is this promise going to be fulfilled? Think of Moses. First, he flees from Egypt. He's in Midian. 40 years working as a shepherd, and then even after he goes to Egypt, frees God's people, again, God has promised this land, the promised land flowing with milk and honey. And they wander in circles, literally, for 40 years in the desert. Waiting, decade after decade. Waiting, this whole idea of waiting comes up over and over and again in the Bible, and especially in the book of Psalms. One of the most common lines in the book of Psalms is this line that says, "How long, O Lord? How long, O Lord?" Right? I'll give you a few examples here. Psalm 6:3. My soul is in deep anguish. How long, O Lord? How long? Psalm 13, verses 1 and 2. How long, Lord? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? How long? Psalm 89. How long, Lord? Will you hide yourself forever? How long will your wrath burn like fire? Psalm 90, verse 13. Relent, Lord. How long will it be? Have compassion on your servants. Again and again and again, this question, this passionate question. How long? I can't go on like this. And just as many times as a question is asked, how long, the answer is given, wait. Wait. Psalm 27, verse 14, wait for the Lord. Be strong, take heart, wait for the Lord. Psalm 33:20, we wait and hope for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. Psalm 37, verse 7, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Psalm 38:15, Lord, I wait for you. You will answer, O Lord, my God, again and again. How long, O Lord? How long, O Lord? Wait, wait, wait. And the psalm that talks most about waiting is the one that we're going to look at this morning, is Psalm 130. And if you look at Psalm 130, you'll see in your Bibles that under, probably where it says Psalm 130, right under that, in kind of the title or the superscription or whatever they call it, you'll see it says a song of ascents. Do you see that? Does it say that in your Bible? Right under the Psalm 130, a song of ascents. There's 15 psalms that are called songs of ascents. Psalms 120 to 134. And it's called a song of ascent because 3 times a year, God's people were called. God commanded all the people of Israel to go to Jerusalem 3 times a year for particular festivals. And Jerusalem is located on a height, on a hill. And so as people are coming from all over Jerusalem, they're ascending. And as they're ascending, they're singing songs. Okay? And they're singing these songs. They're songs of ascents. As they're ascending up the hill towards Jerusalem, they're singing these songs. And so these songs of ascents, that Psalm 130 is also one of them, these are basically traveling songs. They're pilgrim songs. And if you just think about it for a minute, you quickly realize, well, if it's a traveling song, then it's also a waiting song, isn't it? Tomorrow morning, my family and I, we're going to pack up the car and get in the car, and we're going to drive for 8 hours to Kasauli, between Chandigarh and Shimla, for a little family vacation. And for about 7 or 8 hours that we're in the car, I'm going to hear this refrain from the back seat that says, how long? Not how long, O Lord, but maybe how long, O Lord, but how long, Baba? Are we there yet? How much further until we reach there, right? Traveling is waiting. The whole point of traveling is because we want to get somewhere. We have to endure this travel to get to where we want to be, the destination. And so all these songs of ascents, they're traveling up the hill towards Jerusalem. They're singing these songs, and most of them are about waiting. And especially Psalm 130. And so let me read this for us first, and then we'll get into it. So Psalm 130, starting in verse 1, it says, out of the depths I cry to you, Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to my cry for mercy. If you, Lord, kept a record of sins, Lord, who could stand? But with you there is forgiveness, so that we can, with reverence, serve you. I wait for the Lord. My whole being waits, and in his word I put my hope. I wait for the Lord, more than watchmen wait for the morning, more than watchmen wait for the morning. Israel, put your hope in the Lord. For with the Lord is unfailing love, and with him is full redemption. He himself will redeem Israel from all their sins. It's a song about waiting. And it's interesting, there's 8 verses in this psalm, and half the verses don't talk about waiting. The first half doesn't say anything about waiting, but it gives us the context of waiting. Okay, it tells us why we wait. Okay, so that's the first thing that we're going to see this morning. Why do we wait? Where does this whole idea of waiting even come from? And then the second half, verses 5 to 8, we'll see how do we wait? Okay, how should we wait? And so, first question, why do we have to wait? Why do we have to wait? These first 4 verses, the first half of the psalm, tell us about 2 great realities. There's 2 great realities in the world, in life, for all of us. Okay, the first great reality is given in verses 1 and 2. The psalmist says, out of the depths I cry to you, Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to my cry for mercy. Where is the psalmist as he writes this psalm, this song? Where is he? Did you see that in the first line? Is he in the heights? No. He says, out of the depths, I cry to you. He is at his lowest point. He's hit rock bottom, right? Things have gone down. Things maybe could not be worse for him. Okay, out of the depths, he's crying out. The first great reality of the world, of life, that all of us have to struggle with and endure is suffering. The depths, problems, difficulties, hardships in life. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter how rich, how powerful, how well-connected, how privileged. We all go through suffering. Pastor Gladwin talked about this last week if you were here. Suffering is that part of life, he said, that none of us can part with. That part of life which none of us can part with is suffering. As much as we try to avoid it, as much as we hate it, as much as we try to insulate ourselves from it, no person can avoid suffering. It's just part of life in a fallen, broken world that we live in. Doesn't matter if you're a follower of Christ or not. Right? In fact, if anybody ever says to you, just do this, just do that, just believe, even believe in Jesus, and you won't have to suffer, you won't have to go through hardships, you won't have any problems, don't believe them. Suffering is a part of life. Right? One of the great realities of life in this fallen, broken world. But then he goes on and talks about the other great reality in life, verses 3 and 4. It says, if you, Lord, kept a record of sins, Lord, who could stand? But with you there is forgiveness, so that we can, with reverence, serve you. There's another great reality in life, and that is God. God. But not just God in general. There's, not some being up there somewhere, right? But a particular kind of God. An amazing God that the psalmist knows about. In fact, I really believe Psalm 130, verses 3 and 4 are some of the most profound, amazing verses in the whole Bible. Okay, and I just want to try to, in the best way I can, just show you how profound and amazing these verses actually are. Okay? Look, again, verse 3, very straightforward. But if you, Lord, kept a record of sins, Lord, who could stand? Right? Anybody can understand that. Lord, God, He's holy, He's perfect. Psalmist is saying, if you kept a record of sins, if you had a big list, when I stand before you of all my sins, if you had that before me, if you threw that at me, who could stand? I would be destroyed. I don't have a chance. Right? Verse 3 is very clear. It's very obvious, right? Lord, if you kept a record of sins, who could stand? But then look at verse 4. But with you, there is forgiveness, so that we can, with reverence, serve you. And in my translation, in my NIV Bible here, that's, it's a kind of a bit of a softened translation. And I think some of your Bibles would have slightly different words, perhaps. Right? It says, with you there is forgiveness, so that you may be feared. Right? And that's a more literal translation from the Hebrew that this song is originally written in. With you there is forgiveness, so that you may be feared. Well, wait a second. With you there is forgiveness, so that you may be feared. Why would we fear God if there's forgiveness? Right? We could understand the fear in verse 3, right? If He kept a record of sins, then we would fear Him. Then we would be afraid of punishment. and judgment and being destroyed, obliterated, and everything else. But verse 4 says, with you there's forgiveness, therefore you are feared. Well, where does that fear come from? Or what is the psalmist even talking about? I want to share an experience with you that I had a few years ago that, I think really helped me to understand this verse, okay? I'll just share it with you very, very quickly. Before I was married, several years ago, I was living in the same house that I'm living in now in DLF Phase 2, and we had a whole bunch of guys living in there, sometimes 6, 7, or more, young guys, and all of them were coming to the church, and all of them were believing in Jesus, but we're all from different kinds of backgrounds. Okay, and one guy in particular, he was very young. He was from a very, very difficult background in Delhi. Okay, he grew up in Delhi. He's kind of this gangster type. Okay, very, very rough background, but he had, started to believe in Jesus, and he was coming to church, but he still had, a lot of struggles, and a lot of the temptations and pulls of the world were still there. And one day, apparently, he was very discouraged. He was struggling. And he ended up going to Delhi to meet up with his old friends. And inevitably, as he went to meet with his old friends, they went back to doing their old kind of things that they used to do. In particular, I found out, after this guy hadn't shown up at home, wasn't calling, wasn't picking up his phone or anything, for a couple of days, I found out that he'd gone back with his old friends. And in particular, at least what I know, is that at nighttime, they were near a metro station in Dwarka, and they surrounded a guy on a bike, stole all of his money, split it up, and spent the money on prostitutes. That's what I know of, at least. Okay? And then he didn't come home for several nights, and it was clear when he finally did show up a few days later that, he was very ashamed. He didn't want to face me because I was like his big brother, almost like a father figure in his life at that time, and his pastor, and he was feeling so guilty. He didn't want to show his face in front of me. And he came in finally, and I brought him into my room, and he explained what he'd been up to. And he did something very interesting. He said to me, "I want you to beat me." That's what he said, literally. He said, "I want you to hit me." In fact, he even gave his face. Like, he put his face forward so I could slap him, I could hit him, I could beat him up or something. And as I've kind of thought about what was going on there, it seems to me what is happening is that this is the way that people had dealt with him his whole life, right? You do something bad, you get punished. And I think his thinking was, I've got this guy, I love him, I respect him, and I've done this bad thing, and I deserve a punishment, and so, I'll let him get his frustration and his anger out, and through that punishment, I'll also be free of my guilt. I'll kind of have atoned for my sins, and then we can go on with our lives. Right? But, I had a very different response to him. Maybe something he'd never experienced in his life. I said, "I'm not going to hit you." In fact, he was crying, I was crying. It was this big emotional thing, and I said, I forgive you. He literally would not accept that. He said, "You've got to hit me. You've got to punish me. You've got to do something." I said, "I'm not doing anything. I forgive you. I love you." And when he realized that, I was shocked, I was surprised, I was upset also. But when he realized I was really serious, that I wasn't going to hit him or do any kind of thing like that, and I really loved him, and I was, feeling sad for him. He looked at me with this look almost of fear. And obviously I'm not any great person or something, but I'm pretty sure he'd never encountered that kind of reaction in his whole life. And his words to me that day were, "I'm never going to do anything that makes you cry again. I never want to see tears rolling down your face again." And I really believe that day onwards that he had this respect. Right? And I learned something very profound that day. And that is that forgiveness is actually more powerful than punishment. Isn't it? Grace and mercy is way stronger than judgment. And that's what the psalmist is talking about here, isn't it? You know, if God kept a record of sins and I know it and he knows it, right, and there's punishment, that's just usual, that's standard. But wait a second, now I've got a God who's perfectly holy. He knows I've sinned. I know I've sinned. And now he's offering forgiveness. And he loves me. In fact, he's paying the penalty for my sin. I've never encountered anything like this. This is amazing. This is mysterious. It's life-changing. And a God like that I fear, I revere. I don't want to see him upset. I don't want to see tears rolling down his cheeks, ever. And this is what the psalmist says about God. I've experienced God. He's way more amazing. He's way more mysterious. He's way more gracious and merciful and loving and kind and compassionate. I've experienced it. It's changed me. I know this God. So, on the one hand, you've got suffering. He's in the depths. He's in the pits. It couldn't get any worse. He's at his lowest point. On the other hand, he knows this God. He's experienced this God. He's tasted of his love and mercy and kindness. And in between these two great realities, what do you have? You've got waiting. Right? This is where waiting comes from. On the one hand, you're suffering. You can't do anything to pull yourself out of the depths. On the other hand, you've got this God, this amazing, mysterious, powerful, loving, merciful, kind God. And you're waiting. Can't do anything else except for wait. And wait. And wait. And naturally the question comes, why doesn't God just, if he's so amazing and he's so powerful and he's so merciful and kind and compassionate, why does he just scoop me up out of the depths and relieve me of my suffering? Doesn't he see this? Doesn't he know what I'm going through? Doesn't he hear my cries for mercy? And of course, the answer is that he sees everything. He knows everything. He hears everything. Nothing escapes his notice. He's not ignorant of anything. Then what is God doing? Well, God is working. God is working in our waiting. As we wait, God works. Well, what kind of work is he doing? And I think this is a very, very important thing. The work that he's doing is not working on the situation mainly. That he can do in an instant. That doesn't take him any time at all. The work that he's doing that takes time is working on you and working on me. That doesn't happen in an instant. There's no shortcut for that. There's no easy, quick solution for that. That requires time. God is working as we're waiting, and the main work he's doing is he's changing you and he's changing me through the waiting. How does God work through our waiting? How does waiting change us? I'll give me four ways really quickly. Number one, waiting reveals our true motives. Waiting, like maybe nothing else, reveals our true motives. I'm in the depths, or I'm okay. I want this thing to happen. If God just gave it to me, if God just made it happen, I would just say, thank you, God, and just move on with my happy life. And maybe that's the way it's been all my life. Things have fallen into place and it's been so smooth. And now suddenly I'm stuck. And I'm waiting. And now, suddenly, in my waiting, there's this space that's opened up. Right? In this gap between the suffering and between God, there's this space. There's this silence. There's this time. And it naturally, maybe even automatically, leads us to think about things, maybe for the first time, to actually reflect, maybe actually to stop, actually to question. I want this thing. Even I'm desperate for this thing to happen. And maybe that's, there's nothing wrong with that thing. It's a good thing. But now, I start questioning my motives. Why am I so desperate? Right? What is going on here? The waiting actually gives me the space. It gives me the time. Now I think, I reflect. And very often, when I have that time to think and reflect, it exposes the real workings of my heart. And very often I realize I've actually made an idol of this thing. I think this thing is going to save me. When I get this thing, then I'll be happy, then I'll be satisfied. Then I'll be at rest, then my heart will be at peace, and I can actually start living my life. Now, if I just got it instantly, I just would have taken it, moved on, and been happy. Now this waiting is exposing all these inner workings of my heart. I've actually made this into a god. I'm not trusting in God, I'm trusting in this. That's the first thing I think that waiting does. It reveals our true motives. It exposes idolatry. Second thing, waiting makes us appreciate things more. Isn't that true? I was thinking back at my own waiting this week as I was preparing this message, and I realized, I probably wanted to get married when I was around 25. I didn't get married until I was 32. 7 years. Like Jacob waiting for Rachel. I was waiting. And I probably don't appreciate my wife, Carissa, nearly enough. I can't imagine if God had just given me somebody right at that point. More recent example, it's kind of still ongoing in a way. We were in this big land project that we call Building Hope. And we want to buy 2 acres of land and so on. Very early on in this process, in fact, almost 4 years ago, I have this very wealthy friend in America, and he kind of hinted, or at least I thought he hinted, that he was just going to buy the land for us. And I know that he has the capacity to do that. And so, I kind of was feeling him out a little bit, and over the next few weeks, I realized that's not what he was saying at all, even though he's a very nice guy and he's very generous and so on. It was never his plan. That was some kind of misunderstanding or reading into something that he said or whatever it was. And very quickly I realized this land, this 2 acres or whatever, it's not just going to be handed to us on a silver platter. Probably if it was, it would have said, thank you God, thank you this person, and let's move on, maybe to the next project, 5 acres, 10 acres. And now we've been slogging away at this 4 years, probably thousands of hours of prayer and fundraising and presentations, and I'm trying to identify land and this and that. That day, I hope it comes soon. That day when we walk onto the land and the paperwork is done and we have our Thanksgiving service, I'm sure there's going to be tears on a lot of our faces. Right? How precious, how much work it was to raise these crores of rupees and to do all the legal work and everything else to actually get land. It's hard. Right? If it was just handed to us, hard to think about it. Right? The waiting. 4 years counting, it makes us appreciate it, right? How precious is this? Waiting does that. Third thing, waiting transforms our character. Of course it does. Right? People have just gotten things instantly the moment they ask for it. Right? They miss out on all of this opportunity to build character, don't they? And just think of Moses. Before we went on sort of a summer break from our home group, we just started the book of Exodus. And looking at this first few chapters of Exodus on the life of Moses. And Moses, of course, through these amazing circumstances, if you know the story, he ends up growing up in the home of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, the most powerful man in the world, and he's the prince. And I don't know about you, but I get the sense that he is the kind of guy who gets whatever he wants, whenever he wants it. He sees somebody treating somebody else the way he doesn't like it, he just kills them. Right? That's the way he is. He's brash. He's impatient. He's just a guy who's used to getting his own way. But then he has to run. Right? And then he works as a lowly shepherd for 40 years. And when God meets him 40 years later at the burning bush, he's a very different person, isn't he? Right? There's something about waiting that changes us, doesn't it? It deepens us. It's good. Finally, waiting builds dependency and intimacy with God. Right? When I'm in the depths, when nothing I've tried is working, right, I cry out to God. Maybe it's been months, maybe it's been years, maybe I've never cried out to God in my life, but now, in the depths, I don't see any other way out. Suddenly I'm crying out to God. And we have so many people visiting our church, and they're in desperate situations for whatever reason. They say they've been to every temple, every Baba, every guru. They've been to the mosque, they've been here, they've been there, and finally they've come to the church. And there's this hunger, and there's this sensitivity, and there's this desperation. And God says, finally, you're here. And I'm happy. And I'm learning to rely on God. And I realize how much I need him. And I'm seeing his faithfulness to me. Right? I've actually come into a relationship with God, and I'm looking to him. Right? That's what waiting does. Right? And this is what God is doing. As we're waiting, God is working. And so I heard this line. Somebody just mentioned it, kind of this throwaway sentence a few weeks ago, and it just really caught my attention. I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but this is what this person said. Time waited is not time wasted. Time waited is not time wasted. Right? In God's economy, in God's plan, in God's administration of all this, he knows what he's doing. I think I'm getting older. I'm not getting younger. Right? And the months and the years and they're just passing by, and this is not happening, and I've been waiting and God said it's not lost. In our waiting, God's been working. And so, where does waiting come? It comes from these two great realities, suffering and our God. In between, we wait. God is working. Right? Second half of the psalm tells us, how do we wait? How do we wait, right? So, he's talked about the depths. He's talked about God, right? And the result, verse 5, I wait for the Lord. My whole being waits, and in his word I put my hope. I wait for the Lord more than watchmen wait for the morning, more than watchmen wait for the morning. And I think, how do we wait? I think there's at least two things that this psalm tells us about how we should wait. First one is this: waiting is active. Waiting is active. The psalmist says, again, at the beginning, first line of verse 5, I wait for the Lord, my whole being waits. My whole being. Can you just get the sense of that? Every cell in his body is active in this waiting. It's not just sitting around. It's not just wasting time. It's not just turning on the TV. It's not just twiddling your thumbs. It's not just taking a nap. Right? My whole being is actively waiting. Very interesting. And he says twice here, I wait for the Lord more than watchmen wait for the morning, more than watchmen wait for the morning. Very interesting metaphor of a watchman. You think about a watchman, a night watchman, security guard, somebody who works the whole night. And a watchman, they don't have to be very skilled people. Right, let's be honest. There's no special education that's required. Not even really training that's required. Okay? And watchman's job is just to watch. Right? It's not a very hard job, actually. Right? But at the same time, it's a very critical job, isn't it? If the watchman doesn't watch, if he falls asleep or if he's distracted for whatever reason, crores of rupees could be lost. Right? Property could be lost. In fact, in this time, 3,000 years ago, when he's talking about a night watchman, he's talking about the guards that are watching on the walls of the city. Right? If the watchmen who are watching guard on the walls of the city, if they fall asleep, if they're distracted, if they're not doing their job, then lives could be lost. The whole nation could be lost. It's not a very hard job, but it's a very critical job. And back then, by the way, there wasn't watches. There wasn't clocks on the wall. Right? 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 4 a.m., 5 a.m. Right? You're just waiting. It's dark. And you don't know if it's been an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, if there's another whole night that's left, or if there's 20 minutes that's left. Right? You're just there, literally in the dark. Waiting. Alert. Ready. And that's what the psalmist is doing here, right? He's active. He says, my whole soul, my whole being waits. He says in verse 7, I'm hoping. As we're going to see in a moment, that's not just dreaming or wishful thinking, right? It's something very purposeful and intentional. He's calling others to hope. Israel, put your hope in the Lord. He's encouraging others. In other words, he's doing everything that he can, that he knows of, right? As he actively waits. He's not passive at all. That's the first thing that we learn from this psalm about waiting. Waiting is active. But the second thing that we also learn is that waiting means trusting God. Trusting God how? It means trusting God to work. Whatever he wants. In his time. In his way. Right? That's what waiting means in the Bible. Right? Did you see that? Verse 5, I wait for the Lord. Verse 6, I wait for the Lord. Verse 7, put your hope in the Lord. And this is such an important point, right? Because most of us, when we're waiting for something, when we really want something, our focus is so much on that thing to happen or this thing to change or whatever it might be, right? That we're consumed with that thing. That thing, we just need it to happen. Do you know what I'm talking about? And yet the psalmist here, what he's saying is, I wait for the Lord. My hope is in the Lord. In other words, I'm giving my life, my situation, my problem, my future, everything into His hands. And if this happens or not, I'm letting go of that. I'm putting my hope in the Lord because all I want is what He wants. Do you see the difference? Hoping in the Lord versus hoping for the Lord to do this thing. Right? When I hope in the Lord, I'm saying, I want what you want, God. Maybe you want this, maybe you don't. I just want what you want. Right? That's what it means to trust in God, to wait for the Lord to work. And even if He wants this thing to happen, He might have His own way of doing it. Right? Just like this land project. I said, I would love for this guy to just give us all the money and we'd be done. Right? God says, yeah, I might want you to have this land, but I want you to do it in my way. And I certainly want you to do it in my timing. So when I'm trusting God and when I'm waiting on the Lord, when I'm putting my hope in Him, I'm saying, Lord, whatever you want, whenever you want it, however you want it, it's all yours. The ends, the means, the timing, I'm entrusting myself to you completely. That's what it means to wait on Him, to trust in Him, to hope in Him. And of course, that's incredibly difficult to do, isn't it? Because I want this thing so desperately, and I've been waiting for it. And I really feel if it just could just happen, then everything would change, and it would be so good. Right? But when we know God, right? When we've experienced God, when we know that we can trust His character and His ways, because we've seen it in the past and we've tasted of His love, and we know His goodness. I say, I actually give myself to you. I trust you. Whatever you want, whenever you want it, however you want it. God, I'm trusting you. That's what it means to trust. Right? This is what faith is. Lord, I'm waiting for you. So, what should I do now? Just a few points, right? Putting this all together, let's make it a little bit practical for ourselves. Number one, be honest with God. Right, this is the thing we all love about the Psalms. Right? They're so brutally honest. They're so raw. Whatever the psalmist feels, he expresses to God. Even if it's discouragement, even if it's frustration, even if it's anger, right? He just says it to God, and God can handle it. God just wants us to be honest with Him. Right? Be honest with God. Second thing, resist despair. Resist despair. This is what the enemy wants. He's working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. He doesn't take breaks. He doesn't sleep. All the time, constantly, waking or sleeping, he's putting thoughts in our brains and in our hearts. Give up. Quit. It's not worth it. Just let it go or whatever. Right? His whole job is to discourage and to bring hopelessness. And I just wonder sometimes how many people gave up And God was ready to act that very night or next week or by the end of the year. Everything would have changed, but they gave up. If you could have just waited till Monday, but you gave up on Sunday. Oh, sad. Resist despair. Resist shortcuts. I want that thing. I've been waiting for that thing, and I just tell this little lie, and it can be mine. All right, I just pay this bribe. Or I just say yes to this guy, and he loves me. And I know it's not right for this reason and this reason and this reason. I know it's not right, but I'm so tired of waiting. And it's so easy, and I could just have it. Just compromise a little bit. Don't do it. Don't do it. All right, you got that thing, but you're stepping out of God's will to do it. Resist those shortcuts. On the other hand, seek God, right? This is the time as I wait. Oh, what a great time. I seek the Lord. I go hard after God. This is my time to grow. This is my time to learn, right? In fact, in verse 5, he says, I wait for the Lord. My whole being waits. In his word, I put my hope, right? What a great time to get into God's word, to read the Bible, to study the Bible, to sink it deep into my heart, right? To spend time with God, to come to church, to come to youth meeting, to come to home group, right? As I wait, perfect time to prepare myself, to learn, to grow, to seek God. Next thing, remember the past. We've seen God's faithfulness in the past, right? We see it in the scriptures. We see how the great heroes and champions of the faith have had to wait years and decades before this thing happened. Right? We've experienced it in our own lives. God's faithfulness. Right? It might have been hard. I might have had to wait. But God came through, and I've experienced that. And now I'm in the same situation, and God is the same. Right? Remembering God's faithfulness in the past is incredible inspiration to trust God for the future, isn't it? Right? Remember the past. Next point, very important. Be faithful in the small things now. You say, but you don't understand this thing, if it happens, is going to be huge. And that'll be great when it happens. And we'll pray that it happens. But what are you doing right now? And it's so easy to say, when that thing happens, then life will really begin, right? That's when things are really going to take off. Dear friend, life is happening right now. It's happening all around us. Right? And yes, maybe this is going to change hugely when that particular thing happens. Right? But what are you doing right now? Are you being faithful right now? Right? Jesus made it very clear. Those who are faithful in little things will be given big things. Of course. Why would God give us big things if we're not faithful in small things? Why would your boss give you big things if you're not faithful in small things? Right? This is the way life works. Are you being faithful in the little things? And by the way, I would lump in with this one. You know, sometimes it's so easy to be consumed with this thing that I want, that I've been waiting for, that, you know, that I'm totally blind to all the other needs right around me. I'm so focused on myself and getting this thing for myself. And one of the best things that we can do as we're waiting for this thing for myself is to help so many other people, right? Small things make a big difference. And by the way, I would also lump in with that one, can I rejoice when I'm waiting for something and it's not seeming to be happening and somebody else gets it in the meantime? Can I rejoice with those who rejoice? Right? I've been waiting for this promotion. That guy got it. Am I just angry and frustrated and upset? Or am I happy for that guy? Right? I've been waiting to get married. This person got married. They've been waiting half the time. Can I rejoice with those who rejoice? Am I being faithful in the small things now, even as I'm waiting for that, whatever that might be? And finally, ultimately, choose to trust God. This is a choice that we need to make every day, isn't it? This is what faith is all about. It's a battle. We fight for faith. Right? So often we think about faith as something we just kind of relax and, it's all under control, blah, blah, blah. Right? That's not my experience. Faith is a daily struggle. Right? I struggle to believe. I struggle to remember there's a God. There's a God who's at work. Even as I wait, he's at work. And so I'm going to get out of bed. I'm going to live to work another day. I'm going to keep at it. I'm going to be faithful in the small things. And it's interesting, by the way, that whole metaphor of the watchman, the night watchman waiting for the morning. The beautiful thing is, morning always comes, doesn't it? Morning always comes. It might have been a lot more miserable. It might have been a lot more mosquitoes out there. It might have felt like 6 days that I've been waiting. Morning always comes. With God, there's always hope. Maybe not exactly what I want, when I want it, how I want it, but there's always hope. Morning always comes. If not in this life, then certainly in the next life. And that is, in fact, where the psalm ends. Right? Did you see that? If you look at Verse 7, Israel, put your hope in the Lord, for with the Lord is unfailing love, and with him is full redemption. He himself will redeem Israel from all their sins. Ultimately, what is the psalmist waiting for? It's not just getting out of the depths. It's not just waiting for the problem to end or the suffering to cease or the marriage to happen or the job to take place. What is he waiting for? He's waiting for redemption. He's waiting for his sins to be gone forever. He's waiting to have a relationship with God. He's waiting for heaven to be with God forever. And this is the exact thing that God did, right? At just the right time. If you just look Galatians chapter 4, when the set time had fully come, God sent his son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive adoption as sonship. When the set time had fully come, God sent his son. And what did his son do? Romans 5:6, you see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. At just the right time. God is always on time. He's never late. He's never early. He's always on time. Every time. Right? And ultimately, this is our hope, right? When this life of waiting, this life of suffering is done, we're going to see God. All our dreams are going to come true in an instant. Suffering is not ultimate. Redemption is ultimate. As somebody said, the depths have a bottom. The heights are boundless. Right? And that's what's coming very soon. The short life of waiting is going to be done. And we're going to be with Jesus forever and ever and ever. No more waiting. In the meantime, may God give us so much grace, so much strength, so much encouragement, so much faith, so much hope to wait